Hi everyone, Jane here. Thank you so much for watching today and welcome. Today I am going to be working in my Dina Wakley watercolour journal, and I really felt like creating lots of layers. Sometimes when you create lots of layers it can get a bit messy, it can get a bit muddled and maybe a bit chaotic, and one of the ways that you can sort of help this is by having a sort of limited colour palette. So that's what I decided to do today. So I'm going with a yellow, turquoise and olive theme with a little bit of brown thrown in for good measure. And I wanted to start with acrylic paint. So even though this is a watercolour journal, I treat it more as a mixed media journal. The paper is quite sturdy, so it will hold up to this pretty well. And I've got some acrylic paints from Indigo Blue to start with. I'm going with a banana custard. This one is Townhouse Teal, and then the next one is olive waistcoat, and I will list all the products I've used in the description as usual. Now I didn't feel like putting it on with a paintbrush, and I wanted to do this sort of swoop across the page from bottom left to top right, and you can just see I've just noticed that the texture paste from the previous page is just slightly showing through on that left hand side. There's a little bit of a ghost print coming through there, so that's quite fun. And I wanted to just add a sort of a texture to the paste, so I'm using my brayer to put down the first couple of layers. I didn't worry too much about drying in between because I knew I was also going to be using green, and also with acrylic paint it does sort of dry pretty quickly, so I didn't have to worry about it really muddying up. And like I say, I chose colours that I knew that if they do mix they're going to be fine. So after I'd put those two layers down with the brayer, I'm going in with my silicone catalyst tool from Princeton, and I'm just adding in some sort of scrapes and lines just to build a bit more structure into the page. And lines, I find, for me, work really well for doing that if I want to get a bit more structure into a page. Now I'm going in with some stamping, so I've chosen 3 archival inks that match that colour scheme. So we've got Fossilized Amber, Crushed Olive and Evergreen Bough. And I've got this set of stamps. I got these at Christmas. Got these for Christmas, I should say, and it's Tidbits, and it's a Stampers Anonymous set designed by Tim Holtz, and it's lots of little words and numbers and postmarks and all those sorts of lovely things. So I just wanted to add some extra details and interest into that background, and by using the same colours that I've already laid down, I can add to that layered textured look without creating too much contrast and chaos, maybe by using a different colour. So it's all going to sort of balance in together, hopefully. So I generally, if I'm doing background stamping, I tend to start with my lightest colour and then I build up towards the boldest. And sometimes you might stamp down and think, oh, that's not stamped out very well. Sometimes you need to give a stamp a couple of stamps to get sort of warmed up. It has to sort of get that ink to cling to it. And the more you use stamps, the better they tend to be. When I'm using archival ink, I don't worry about cleaning my stamps. You can buy specialist archival cleaner that will clean off archival ink, because archival ink is, I think it's like an alcohol or oily based ink, so it's waterproof. So if you wanted to use watery products over the top, the ink line is not going to move. It also is a really good one for stamping over other surfaces. So that is why I tend to use it in art journaling, because quite often I might have acrylic paint down. And if you're using something water reactive, like a distress ink, it will not stick to that paint. So it's a really nice one for using in your art journaling. And if you like to get a lot of colours, you don't want to spend out on the big ink pads, because they do last quite a long time. I buy the little minis, so I get a variety of colour, and I don't have to store lots and lots of massive ink pads either, which is quite handy. Now, once that had dried, and again, archival ink doesn't take very long to dry. You can heat set it with a heat tool as well if you want to make sure, and that will just help it a little bit extra, a little bit more to stick. I decided I wanted some stenciling, but I didn't want too much stenciling, and I was already in my mind, this has got a very natural nature vibe with the yellows and the greens and the blue. So I'm going in just from the two corners with this stencil by Lavinia, and it's called Glory. It's one that I really do like. It's got quite a nice fine detail, and I could call it caught around the edge of the page there. And I'm just using the Amsterdam acrylic paint, and this is titanium white. I must say the paints I used to start with were the matte paints. I don't know if I mentioned that. These ones are not a matte acrylic, they're just a normal acrylic paint. So I added it into the corners, and I just went in with one extra little sort of frond. I say frond because I think they're like ferns, just to come out, just to make it a little bit more pretty, really. Now, I made sure that was dry, and then I wanted to add in some stamping. And this stamp set is by Pretty Gets Gritty here in the UK. And it's called, let me see, it's called Perfectly Inky Bird. It's one of my favourite stamp sets to use. I love the background stamps in it, and I especially love the bird in it. So I'm just going in with the sort of, it's like a faded out dot circle. And I thought it's got quite a bit of oomph to it, but it's also, because of the way it's designed, it's also lets still the colour shine through. It's not too in your face and solid. And I'm using Versafine Clair. Now Versafine Clair is more of an oily based ink. Again, it's a good waterproof ink, but it does take longer to dry on things, so you might need to make sure you heat set. I find if I'm using it on things like watercolour cardstock, it's not so bad because it sinks in, but if you're using it on any sort of coated cardstock, it can take quite a long time to dry. The other way to get around that is to add clear embossing powder over the top to seal it in, and then it won't move, but that is something to be aware of with that ink. Then I wanted to add a little bit more in. I just felt there was still something missing from my background. And I've got these 49 and Market rub-on transfers. Now they do these Textblends in a variety of different colours. And the colour that I have bought, so I haven't got loads of rub-ons. I think I've got about 5-6 sheets, just of different brands with different sorts of designs and styles. This one is called Hickory, which I thought the brown went nicely with that background stamping. One thing I did discover is that where I was going over, I think it's where I was going over the acrylic paint, it did pull a little bit, and it did pull up some of my background paper in places. But because it's a really messy-ish background, I would say, it wasn't really of a worry to me. You see there, I took a little bit and I managed to peel it back off, and I managed to sort of stick it elsewhere. I cut the bits that I want from the main sheet just to make sure that I'm only sort of putting down the bits that I want. I don't want to like accidentally take bits off the sheet that I don't want. And there is like a carrier sheet on the back, which I'd forgotten about there, you will see. So you have to get that transparent part off. And then I'm giving it a good old rub with my lolly stick. It didn't come with the stick in this one. I took the stick from another pack. And you just keep rubbing, and then I just gently lift a corner, see how it's going. If it's not coming up, I put it back down and give it another rub. Sometimes you have to change angle or change direction with the rubbing just to make sure you're getting all of that down. Now you'll see here, I don't know if you'll be able to see, but here I also did have a bit where it wasn't sticking down properly and it pulled my background. You see there, it's pulled the actual paper off. So that is something to be aware of when you're using rub-ons in your mixed media. I wanted this lovely inky bird as my main focal point, so I'm going in separately on my stamping platform, again with the Versafine Clair, and the colour is Acorn. I don't know if I mentioned that earlier, it's Acorn, this brown. I think Versafine Clair do a few different browns, and then I just cut it out with a very, very slight border and decided that I would colour for a change with my Neocolors. Since I've got them back out the tins and into a pot, I find that I use them much more often. And rather than straight away taking the pigment from the stick, I decided I would scribble it down and then blend it out with some water, which I found quite a nice way of using them. I do like to use the brush onto the stick if I want in something a little bit more detailed, or sometimes if you find the lines don't go out totally where you've scribbled them down, it's leaving, sometimes it will leave marks in your cardstock, and then I go back in with the pigment on my brush just to help blend that together. But again, because I've got colours that mix together nicely, I wasn't worried about them muddying, and the colours I have got for this were yellow, turquoise blue, olive green, and you will see in a little bit I also use the brown. So I'm sticking again with that colour theme, and that just means that everything is just going to look quite cohesive. Now sometimes what I do is if I've got a certain colour scheme for my background, I might then for my focal point actually go the total opposite and go with a contrast. So if I've got a yellow, green and blue background, I might then go for, you know, a pink and a orange, red, like the opposite colours for my bird to provide a total contrast. And that also can look really lovely as well and help to balance out that sort of the sameness. But I really felt like I wanted this whole spread to be very cohesive in the colours, and that was the colour palette that I was going with. I love this bird so much. It's a really lovely one to colour in because it's got so much open space and you don't have to worry about it. You can be whatever you want it to be. So I made sure that was dry, and then I found this sentiment just amongst all the bits and bobs that I've got in my stash, and I just cut it up into pieces, and it is on a cream cardstock. So I debated whether to add a little bit of colour to it to sort of blend it with the colour scheme, but actually I decided that the cream made it stand out quite nicely. And so I'm just going in with my Cosmic Shimmer glue. This is an acrylic glue, so a bit like a PVA type glue, and I'm using this because I have got layers in that background, and I did want, this is a thicker cardstock, both with the bird and the sentiment. Oh, by the way, I did stamp the bird onto watercolour cardstock, so that is a little bit thicker than if I was to add, you know, some of my usual thinner collage onto a page. Something to be aware of when you're adding things into a journal. I don't worry too much, but if you know you're not wanting too much bulk, that is where your thinner collage will come in really handy. You can stamp onto plain collage tissue as well and use, you know, get it in that way. So you can still use your stamps with thinner papers and add thinner layers into your journaling. But for this one, I really did want to sort of have that slight thickness to it to come stand out from the page. And then I'm just going in with a little bit of the brown Neocolor too, just to add a little bit of shadow underneath the words so that they stand out a bit more. And then I thought I would just add a little bit around the bottom half of the bird also, just to show where the shadow would be and to help make that stand out a little bit as well too. So I had just finally add on some little splats with the Neocolor too, and then I did make sure I dried that afterwards because it's going on top of things like the acrylic paint. So that's the end of my project. I hope you enjoyed it today. Please do give this video a thumbs up if you did, and if you haven't already subscribed, I'd love it if you could subscribe as well. And if you do see that hype button, I think it's mostly on app sort of scenarios, then please do hit that hype button because it does help the video to get seen in more places. And at the end of the video you will see a list of my lovely super supporters. These are my YouTube members, so an extra thank you to them for their added support. And until the next time, bye bye.